So we're going.
We're good. Yep. And let me find Ruth here. There she is. Oops. Whoops. Where'd she go? They keep jumping around here.
They keep jumping around.
Yeah, as people are populating the. There we go.
57. Whoa.
Yeah,
Now
she
we're in
is.
business.
Welcome, Ruth.
there she is.
Sorry for the
Okay.
traffic jam.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I know it's hard getting in this place. All right, so
It's a very exclusive
now that we're
club.
all here, that's right. Parking was hard to find. Okay, so let's call this Wilton Board of Education regular meeting, although virtually, to order May 7th at 7:05. First order of business is to review and approve the agenda. I would like a motion to approve the agenda and reversing sections D and E. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
So moved. I make a motion to approve the
Okay, a second.
agenda and reverse sections D and E.
Second.
Thank you. Second? Glenn, I think seconded. All right, all in favor?
Yep, whatever.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, time for comments from the public. This is via email. We do this at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. Lucille, are there any comments from the public?
Yes, there are. First comment.
Okay, if you could.
Okay, Paul Bologna, Wilton resident, he didn't put a street address in. The BOE already knows that the budget can be cut by any percentage despite the MBR minimum budget requirement. The BOE hiding behind the MBR is disingenuous and a blatant omission lie to the BOF and the residents of Wilton. And give back the entire $3 million surplus and budget any reserves needed into the coming budget, which will require further cuts of 2020-21 operating budget. What is the potential MBR penalty we are talking about? Penalty could be from 0 to $427,000 in aid. First, if MBR shortfall is made up in following year's budget, then no penalty applies at all. This would allow BOE to cut budget by 10% or more for 1 year during this crisis and raise the budget back to MBR levels in the following year. That's what prudent organizations are doing during these unprecedented economic times. Cutting budgets today with the hope of restoring budgets in the future. Second, any penalty could be waived by the state due to crisis circumstances. Third, if the penalty is equivalent to the state aid of approximately $427K received last year, then surely cutting the budget by 10% to save 8.0 plus million far outweighs a penalty of some 400K. Finally, contracts are subject to cancellation under force majeure. Time to do some real work and realign school contracts to economic realities. Will there be changes to school services that affect students, teachers, administrators, and parents? Yes. Are our lives already changed due to this crisis? Yes. We have to do more with less? Yes. That's what sacrifice by all looks like. The consequences of reckless governance in times like this could actually bankrupt Wilton and the schools. We were unprepared for this crisis. We can easily be unprepared for the next if decisive action is not taken to defend against the unknown. Bankruptcy would have far graver consequences than a 1 year 10% plus budget cut. If Buffett and the smartest minds in the world don't know the future, Buffett is currently buying nothing and sitting with 135 plus billion in cash, then what makes Wilton's boards know anything more than nothing about the future? Are we able to self-govern or not? Now is the time for all involved in Wilton to sacrifice today as to preserve the possibility up for tomorrow. The alternative is far worse. Respectfully, Paul Bologna. And there's one more.
Okay.
The second comment is from Ed Pat, 28 Walnut Place. I am in favor of returning the $3 million of unspent funds to the town. I also support a further 5% reduction in the BOE budget for next year. The cuts should not affect building maintenance, IT equipment, and supplies used by students. To do so simply defers required expenditures. It is time for the BOE to recalibrate and reorganize its administrative and classroom personnel given declining enrollment. Declining student performance reveals the false notion that more money equates to better academic results. No more comments.
Okay, thank you for reading those. We will also have an opportunity at the end of the meeting. The consent agenda, has everyone had a chance to review that? Is there a
Yes.
motion to approve the consent agenda? I'm going to say Glenn chimed in first. Okay,
Okay.
is there a second?
Second.
All right, whoever did
Second.
that, it's fine. Thank you, Gretchen. All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, anyone opposed? Okay. Now we're going to switch to section E, as we voted on earlier. We are going to go through these budget different components and items, beginning with discussing and approving fiscal year 20 end of year financial projection. Anne, we have the papers. Is there anything you want to add to that or summarize?
Sorry, other than reminding everybody, we cut it down to 50,000 for the bus contract. Nothing has changed on it.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
All right, Jen moved, and Glenn, I'm going to take that as a second. Any discussion?
Nope.
Any
I
discussion?
think we spent.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye,
Aye.
raise your hands.
Aye.
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 All right, thank you. Any opposed? Abstain? Passed. Thank you. Now we move on to discuss and approve the purchase of the technology equipment of up to $800,000. Is there a motion to do so? Then we'll go into discussion.
Motion to discuss.
Well, you want to approve it, and then I'll go, then the piece of it is discuss it.
Okay. Motion to
Okay, sorry,
approve.
yeah, I usually don't do it that way, but thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jen. All right, discussion, questions? We have seen this concept before. Any further questions about how it works? And again, this was different than perhaps the original lease idea that was in the former proposed budget.
No, it makes
Okay.
sense to do it. I think it's,
Okay,
I support this move.
okay,
I just want to clarify that we do want to proceed with this because of the risk that if we don't, we will be behind the 8 ball when we need to replenish our units or our devices. And there's a chance that there may not be anything available and our kids would not have what they needed for school if we had to do a homeschool or e-learning again, correct?
Yeah, I
That's
think that-
some of the
I see
information
Fran
that
nodding and, yeah.
there are supply chain concerns right
that's
now.
correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion? Right, all in favor? Say aye, raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, approved, thank you. Discuss and approve, these are the proposed encumbrances. Anne has supplied us a list. It's revised, since we did approve the technology purchase. So the amount, we took the technology lease cost out of there. Is that the difference, Anne, between this list and last time?
Yes, correct.
It is.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Or
Can you
any
just run through the-
questions or discussion?
Yeah, can you just run through what is on there now? I think there are 3 areas that are currently on the encumbrance proposal. Is that right, Kevin? Remaining,
We have more,
technology
a
out.
few more
There are
than 3.
several-
So,
there are several items.
equipment. It's equipment at $200,000, training conferences at 34, operating and general supplies at 50,000, transportation services at 37,579.
We're talking about
Textbooks and
those are
workbooks.
not encumbrances.
They are encumbrances.
Yes, they are.
Yes,
These
they are in the
The
encumbrances.
total amount is 8,822. So textbook workbooks 36,243. Building maintenance and supplies 10,000. Equipment repair and maintenance 10,000.
Glenn, you might be thinking of reserves.
No,
This
okay.
is,
all
this is
right,
different.
okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, these are the items
Right.
that we can
Encumber.
purchase now.
We can encumber, right? I got it. Okay.
All right, thanks. Any other questions or discussion? All right, is there a motion to approve the encumbrances as outlined in the briefing summary of May 6th?
So moved.
Thank you, Glenn. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mandy. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Approved. All right, the next item, discuss and approve request to reserve unexpended funds from fiscal year 20. And I think, Glenn, this is probably your category question.
Right. Yeah, that was it. Yep, you got it.
All right, Kevin, do you want to describe that, or Anne?
Sure. So this is a proposal, as you just mentioned, to reserve. It's a total of $869,000 in the general fund to address unanticipated costs related to the COVID-19 impact on the Wilton Public Schools, or the potential impact. So the first category is tied to special education, compensatory education costs. And that's in the amount of $350,000. The second is special education legal costs in the amount of $169,000. And then the third is in other COVID relating, operating and program costs. So, as we had discussed on each of those, they're just an incredible number of unknowns. And so not knowing what we may have to encounter when we return to school, we thought it prudent to request a set aside of additional funds should we need them.
Okay, and we discussed these at the last meeting, and the special education legal costs there's a number there for that, so thank you. Any questions or discussion?
No.
Is there a motion to approve?
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you, Glenn. A second?
Second.
I got Gretchen's hand first. Okay, thank you, Gretchen. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Any opposition? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Approved. Next
I hope
item,
it's enough.
discuss and approve proposed Discuss and approve proposed superintendent's proposed revised budget for fiscal year 21 in the amount of $82,344,563. Kevin, do you want to just, you've seen it obviously, but do you want to highlight it or summarize it or anything?
Yeah, do you mind? I have a few things I'd like to say in setting this up, if you don't mind. It's going to take a couple
Of
minutes.
course. Yeah, please do.
First and foremost, to all of you, I just want to say to you, our board, thank you for guiding our district and partnering with all of us as we work through this unprecedented time. I also want to take a minute and just recognize all of our staff, teachers, and administrators, and thank them too for their incredible efforts at providing instruction and support to our students and families. It's been a tough 6 or 7 weeks. It's been a really tough couple of days. And I just want to highlight a couple of points here as we get into the budget conversation. We knew and we were expecting the governor and the commissioner to announce the cancellation of school for the remainder of the year. And while the announcement felt inevitable, it is still tremendously upsetting. I've spent the last day and a half thinking about all of our students and teachers who won't come back to school this year. I get upset even just trying to formulate my thoughts around this. All of the classroom and team community rituals and relationships developed and deepened over the course of this year that give a single, unique, and one-of-a-kind definition to the experience. We have a habit of saying here that our kids only get one time through our schools. And it's the relationships with the teachers and with their peers that often make that one time just so special and so indelible. So I really, really feel so sorry for our kids and for their teachers. So that was bad news. And then you layer on top of that the notification by Governor Lamont that live graduation ceremonies won't be permissible. And I'll just let you know, on the mood meter that we've talked about, where most of the time I'm solidly in the yellow, I know I join many and am solidly in the blue. And while these decisions are completely necessarily appropriate, they still constitute a substantial loss for our students, families, and staff. And so to all of them, to our seniors especially, I want to say again just how sorry I am. And I say this in setting up a budget conversation because it's important to just name really explicitly just how important and valuable our schools are in terms of the relationships that students have with each other, that they have with their teachers, and how those relationships undergird the magic of the instruction and the education. So in spite of that bad news, I've also witnessed firsthand through the eyes of my own children the Herculean efforts of our teachers and staff at maintaining connections, providing support and encouragement, and delivering good lessons daily. This week, we celebrate Teacher Appreciation Week, and I do hope our teachers know how much we truly appreciate them. Our PTAs this week have been wonderfully creative in their own efforts to recognize our staff, and so I'd like to say a special thank you to them as well. I think it goes without saying that it does absolutely take a village, and Wilton is a very, very special village. It's a village that cares about its residents and especially cares about its young. The level of care that this community demonstrates is one of its defining features that distinguishes from its neighbors. And it's from within that belief system that I propose this for adoption, this recommended revised budget. I believe that we as Wilton have an obligation to provide a Wilton education to our Wilton children and families. In that, this community is defined by its tremendous capacity to care. Similarly, our schools are defined. Care is one of the hallmarks of a Wilton education. Some of the other hallmarks of a Wilton education include the highest quality instruction delivered by the best teachers in small classes, opportunities for students to achieve and excel through a broad range of experiences in the classroom, on the stage and athletic fields, through arts, drama, and music, opportunities to pursue personal interests through a diverse and comprehensive catalog of curricular and extracurricular activities, opportunities to grow and develop as human beings through exposure to rich and varied content and under the guidance and tutelage of our compassionate and gifted staff. Providing a Wilton education requires human and material resources. Our revised budget seeks to fund a Wilton education while also responding to the climate in which we find ourselves. The choices we've made propose protecting the most important features of our Wilton education: class sizes, staff, and programs. This revised budget defers expenditures on facility work at Middlebrook, narrows our professional learning plans, and defers proposed spending on things like classroom furniture. We make these revisions also knowing that the future is uncertain. As of this point in time, it's our great hope that we'll be able to resume normal operations in the fall, but that seems highly unlikely. As you'll see later in tonight's meeting, we have begun planning for what we believe may be a very disrupted return to school. Present in our thinking is a dizzying number of logistical considerations, foremost among them being those that ensure the health and safety of students and staff. It's only as we begin to play out some of these considerations and develop scenarios that we'll begin to see the financial implications. And I share this only to say that our budget reflects our best hopes for what the year can be, and it is likely, as we did this year, that we'll need to adjust rapidly. And that's my final point about this budget. We've demonstrated that we're capable of adjusting rapidly while adhering to our primary mission and purpose. As we move forward, we will continue to adjust as we must and remain focused on serving our students and families. Thank you.
No, thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. Well said. Is there further discussion or questions?
Yeah, if I could, Kevin, I'd like to add, and it was well said what you said, my thoughts and my concerns as we begin to open up now before the summer even gets here and companies begin to reopen and parents who have been working from home are now expected to go back to work. I have great concern and great worry and great hopes and pray for them that they'll be able to do so, where they've been now, front and center with their children and with their students in the home in the day, helping them with their e-learning, et cetera. If they get called back to work now and are expected to return, the hardship it's going to put on them is just mind-boggling to me. And I wish that all of them the very best. I wish there was more that we could do or something we could do to help them and those who have this dilemma in front of them. But there isn't, sadly. So my thoughts go out to them, to all those families out there who have now got to figure out, well, I got to go back to work. Kids aren't going to school. What do I do? And it's a shame. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Okay, is there a motion to adopt the superintendent's proposed budget of $82,344,563?
Yeah, I think it's important to say that this is an absolute flat budget with the prior year.
Yep.
It's not more spending. It's exactly what our budget was this past year. We have savings from this past year's budget that's going to go back to the town as it is. There will be hopefully some savings in the reserves that we've asked for that we will not have to spend that will then also go back to the town. But from my perspective, we need to make every effort that we can back to normalcy. And we don't know what the new normal is going to be, but to the extent that we can manage it and deal with it and present it to our students as they return to school in the fall, we need to do that. There's nothing more important than having them come back in a manner that gets them back into the routine they're used to, the teachers' faces they're used to seeing, the experiences they're used to having, to try and calm the waters out there is very, very important. And this budget does that to a great extent. Totally no, but to a great extent, and to the best extent I think that we can do. So
Right.
I'm all in favor of this. I am. It's the best we can do, and it's the right thing to do in spite of other concerns that have been expressed.
So I'm going to take that as a motion to approve, Glenn.
You got it.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mandy. Any more discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Budget is approved. Thank you. So I don't mean to pile on, but I guess I will. And Kevin and I and Glenn did not obviously talk to each other ahead of time. So, but I like when we passed the last budget in February, it's one of the most critical things the Board of Ed does. So I took a couple of minutes just to talk a little bit about it. So now that we have budget 2.0, I'm going to do that again. I'm glad that we were unanimous in approving the various budget components in this time of crisis. And this is to summarize. First, we adopted the May 6th budget projection, which shows a 2.95 million positive variance. This high amount is completely unusual, and it's because of the pandemic has resulted in online learning only. So usual expenses have been reduced since March 11th, including utilities, conferences, substitutes, equipment, supplies, transportation costs, and more. With these unexpected funds, we are doing several things to help our schools as we look forward to as yet an unclear future about what the learning environment will be. First, we are purchasing some routine items for next year, like equipment, supplies, and textbooks, which takes them out of next year's budget request. Also, rather than embarking on a lease purchase of Chromebooks and teacher laptops, we are purchasing them now. This avoids interest charges and lease payments in future budgets. And very importantly, by purchasing now, we can hopefully avoid problems created by increased national demand and supply chain issues. That amount was $770,000. Of the 1.8 remaining from the 2.95 year-end projected variance, we are requesting that the Board of Selectmen hold $869,000 in reserve funds should we need them for special education compensatory costs, special education increased legal costs, and costs that go beyond next year's ability to address health, safety, and program needs related to COVID. As a note, if funds reserved are not used, they are returned to the town's fund balance. We are recommending to the Board of Finance a flat year-to-year budget of $82,344,563. Back in February, we adopted a budget proposal that represented a $1.55 million year-over-year increase. That is gone through pre-purchasing some items as we described, through deferring the $550,000 Middlebrook renovation project, through reducing training and substitutes, and eliminating and deferring many other items across many other accounts. If all of these strategies are implemented, we can preserve programs and support for students, class size guidelines, and staffing levels for next year. We do this because students enrolled during this crisis deserves no less in educational quality than our students did before the crisis. We also want to maintain our attraction of new families. We anticipate that schools will look different next year in hard ways to imagine, let alone implement. So we need the resources to provide students the best education possible and resources that allow staffing levels and flexibility when we have to shift from certain areas to others. Our students will begin next year with more needs than the usual summer lag, and we will need to adjust. There may be a combination of on-site and online learning. There may be disruptions. Although not yet defined, health and safety protocols will have to be implemented. We need the resources to anticipate and plan for various needs. Some, like athletics, may be less costly than normal if we have to shorten seasons. Others, like academic and mental health support, may be more costly than normal. We have responded to the Board of Ed request for other budget scenarios to take us below flat year-to-year budget. Ahead of discussing these, I want to say up front that these would not be sufficient to meet our needs for all the reasons I just described. The NBR scenario, which Kevin can detail, would reduce teachers, possibly increase class sizes, and erode programs and support that students will need. Reducing NBR beyond NBR turns our system into something not recognizable. So our recommendation for a year-to-year flat budget, as Glenn has said, appropriation will now go to the Board of Finance along with the various scenarios that we'll hear about in a minute. Because there aren't the usual hearings, annual town meeting, and referendum, input from the public is more important than ever. We encourage parents and community members to make your viewpoint and opinions known through emails to the Board of Finance. In place of voting, please take the time to send emails. We are in this together for our students. So thank you again, Kevin, to you and your team for putting all these proposals together and coming up with a strategy that I think, as Glenn said, is the best we can do in this time of crisis. The Board of Finance did request other scenarios, so let's discuss those a little bit.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind. We can
Yeah.
talk through them. Let me just move some things around here. Okay, so I always forget to press the blue share button. There you go. All right, you're able to see my screen, yes?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, with a magnifying glass.
All right, so this is the
Yeah, we have seen the, yeah, we've got that also. Okay, we saw a draft, but okay, there it is. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I've got my glasses.
So that's okay. So we've got a few scenarios to walk through here. So you saw that MBR scenario, and you've heard the explanation about MBR. That I'm just really going to talk in high level detail, and then as we see necessary, we can refine the details. But I think, Debbie, your comments about fundamentally altering what a Wilton education is right on point. So in this scenario, we obviously go back through in broad categories and focus again on the non-personnel accounts. But beginning with MBR, there's no way to avoid reducing staff. So as we shared the other night, a budget reduction to MBR would reflect the dollar equivalent of about 5.5 certified staff. And as I mentioned then, in this scenario, my approach, if we had to go there, would be to try to work through attrition and look at the vacancies we have, and then work with our various administrative leaders to manage those vacancies so we're not having to incur further staff layoffs. At the 2% level, I've got to zoom each of these, I guess. We had, and you'll just have to correct me if I don't get it quite right, but it was about an additional $460,000 or so beyond MBR. And so
Yes.
At that point, it's an additional 4.5 staffer though. And so when we move to the 2% level, I don't think we would be able to achieve those that level of staffing reductions purely through attrition. So then we'd have to look at, program modification or reduction, perhaps course elimination, potential class size reduction. We'd have to start looking at the range of personnel cuts. And as we engage in that process, what I would say to you is we would start in my office and work all the way through the organization and look at every position and evaluate each of those positions to ensure that any kind of staffing modification sought to protect program goals, but was also equitable to the best extent possible. At the 5% level, this is when you really, you can't recognize the Wilton education anymore. So we're talking, far more dramatic in terms of staffing reductions. By our estimates, again, we were just, kind of ballparking based on maybe an average certified staff salary. And so we're estimating approximately a reduction of 36.5 FTE. And chances are it'd probably be greater than that because we would be reducing from the ranks, not only of our certified staff, but also from our classified staff, our custodial staff, our discretionary staff, et cetera. And so that number would likely balloon. And again, as a strategy for reductions, we would look, wholesale across the entire organization. And there's just no escaping, significant program impact at that point. And so then in contemplating what those choices are, we have to think about, what are the most essential services we provide, and then what are the services that we would consider, I hesitate to even use the word not essential or less essential, but we would have to go through a decision-making process. And so that just puts on the table, I think, all of a range of reductions, and we would probably touch every area of the operation. 10%. at this level, you're looking at a $8.2 million reduction here. That magnitude of the staffing reductions, we're estimating, somewhere around 78.5. And again, as we look across the entire organization and contemplate certified, classified, discretionary, likely that that number would be much greater. And at that point, with a reduction of 78 staff members, it's beyond catastrophic. So I think, the other points that we made, and Andre and I still have some work to do to really get some more clarity, but we've discussed the MBR and the potential loss of, ECS funding. And so, while it's not a substantial amount of dollars comparatively, it's an additional reduction potentially. And then similar to that, as we discussed, within IDEA, there's a maintenance of effort provision that also requires a particular level of funding. And if you don't achieve that maintenance of effort, you also put that grant at risk. So there are a lot of questions and considerations about the unforeseen consequences of reductions at this level. And so the IDEA grant is substantial. We also fund a number of our special educators through that grant. And if we put that in jeopardy, then, we also, potentially risk not only losing more staff members, but endangering, we certainly will endanger the way that we're able to provide services to our special education students. So bleak and grim and all of that at these levels for sure.
Yeah, Kevin, I would add to that. If that were the case, it would open us up to a tsunami of litigation if we were not able to meet our legal requirements in that area, or we chose not to.
It would also cause for there to be a further erosion of regular programming.
Oh, yeah.
In an effort to stave off, litigation. So the programs that we know, even thinking of them being a little different, would be devastatingly undermined and cut.
We spoke earlier today. At that point, we get into cutting athletics. We get into cutting the music programs, the arts. Nothing is untouched at that point, except because of our legal obligations, special ed. And to the extent that we can't do anything there, it increases the impact across all of the other areas. And the risk of doing anything in special ed, if you want to open up the checkbook for the attorneys, feel free to go right ahead. But I certainly don't want to do that and face all that uproar. No.
I also think, as both a board member and a taxpayer and a consumer of Wilton's education services, there is an expectation of what we want for our children and for our community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not only for the community right now, but the community that we want a couple of years from now. Mm-hmm. And in trying times, I think schools serve an even greater importance in holding the foundation of a community together. And when we start talking about those types of levels, the sadness and the chills that kind of come over me and rush over me, I'm sure are shared by many on this call. And I would like, if it winds up being that place, I would like it to not be because of our own doing, but because of, of the strange times and the strange things that are happening, that something, forces a hand, but not our own hand.
Any other comments?
No,
I
I
sound
want to say,
discouraged just because I am.
well, You know,
Go ahead. I'm
I don't
sorry,
want to be
Glenn.
discouraged. Yeah, and I don't think we should, because I don't think we're going to go there, or at least not with my support. We're not going there under any city.
No.
We were
No.
lucky enough to have both of our children go through the system, as Ruth talked about, with great experiences, a great education, great social experience. I mean, the whole thing was nothing but positive for us, and that's the reason, one of the reasons we moved here. To think that we would do something now as draconian as that, to take away that from the children who are here today, I can't deal with it. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I will not support that under any circumstances. I know we have a quote crisis situation with the COVID. It's up to us to figure out how do we deliver what needs to be delivered in spite of that. And that's the challenge. The challenge isn't to react to it. The challenge is to deliver what we owe the community, owe our children, the best possible education, the best possible experiences, and do it. That's the challenge, not to cut. Challenge isn't to cut.
Right.
The challenge is to deliver.
Well, I'm reminded that the Board of Finance did ask these as models.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so
we did.
I am going to take that to mean these are theoretical, hypothetical
Right.
models versus any kind of action plan. I can
We
also
hope.
add that, I can also add that I'm a member of, I represent Wilton Board of Ed on the CES, the Cooperative Education Service, their council. And so we meet once a month, and we happen to have a meeting this afternoon. And at the very end of going through the normal agenda, everyone, sort of said, okay, so tell us about your budget situations. And there was a wide range of towns represented. Bridgeport was there, Shelton, Westport, Weston, Ridgefield, Trumbull, Monroe, Reading, and Greenwich. No one was contemplating any cuts like -5% or -10%, nor were they asked to model them. But, that's okay. I don't mind the modeling part as long as they're not contemplated. There are some headlines around some towns, I'll take Greenwich because it's been in the papers that their budget has been cut $3 million. And they absolutely have challenges, but the cut is of their increase. It's not of their current year's expenditure. So they're not going to $3 million below this year's expenditure. So some people who will say, see, Greenwich cut their budget, you have to sort of dig in a little bit and realize they're talking usually about decreasing their increase, not going below what they currently have to spend. So it still puts Greenwich in a very challenging spot, but it's not the same as going below their, this year's appropriation. So all districts, I got the feeling that some of them are going to be eking out a small increase, and they hope to be able to do that. And flat is the worst it got. So that's just of the neighboring districts that I have to date. And again, some of this hasn't been finalized, but flat is the worst it seems to have gotten for anybody at this point. And most of them have not gotten there. Okay, enough, I guess. Are there any other comments? I'm sorry for taking so much time.
Kevin, could you send to all of us the scenarios, the 2, 5, and 10 scenarios?
I sure will, and I'll write a summary of my comments just about the the broad scoping potential impact.
Yeah,
sure.
So we have that in front of us. That'd be great.
Of course.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, we saw the MBR, but we did not see the 5 and 10.
Right.
And
The 2,
the
5,
staff reductions are staggering.
Yeah.
Right. We the staff reductions are staggering. Okay, so we need to approve it, obviously not because we approve or endorse, but simply because we think these accurately fulfill the Board of Finance's request to model the different levels. So is there a motion to approve those models to send on to the Board of Finance that they requested?
Yep, so moved.
Thanks, Glenn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Mandy. All right, all in favor again of approving these models to send to the Board of Finance that they requested, that we believe that Kevin and his staff have put together the models that the Board of Finance requested, and this is accurate. So all in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Any opposition? All right, any abstentions? All right, thank you. All right, now we get to move on to something maybe a little bit more cheerful. We're going to talk about discuss and approving Wilton High School shortened days of Friday, May 15th and Friday, May 22nd.
Right,
Kevin, do you
and-
want to, everybody got a briefing summary, but you want to just highlight it for us?
Sure. And so just to be clear, this is all of Wilton Public Schools, not only the high school. And so the Wellness Committee, which is chaired by Maria, came together last week, and they were just, taking the feedback from, staff and families. And so turned around with a proposal to convert Friday the 15th of May and Friday the 22nd of May into early dismissal days with school ending at noon. I listened to the proposal. I support it. I think it's a very good idea and probably much needed for many. And so I support it. I'd like you to support it. Maria, why don't you go ahead and just give us a background of the conversation?
Sure. So can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So as some members of the board may recall, we started the Wellness Committee a little over a year ago. And the goal of the committee is really to create opportunities to support staff wellness and to focus on self-care for the people who are caring for our students. And since that time, we really had a wonderful school year. We kicked off the year with some water bottles. I happen to have one here with me. It's got our logo on it. Our motto is Wilton Public Schools Wellness Committee, Healthier Together. We use the funds that are allotted to us through Anthem, our healthcare provider. We receive funds from them annually on wellness activities, so we're able to draw from those for different activities that we have for staff. And throughout the course of this year, we've had monthly activities. We have something called Wellness Wednesdays, where we send out inspirational messages, recommendations for recipes, recommendations for wellness and physical activity. We had a step challenge in January where each of our buildings competed internally to see who could achieve the highest number of steps for the year. We had one staff member who reached over 1 million steps in the month of January. And so these are the kinds of things that we've tried to encourage all of our staff to engage in. And, it's been a challenging couple of months with people at home, and we've received feedback from staff members. We've received feedback even from families. When we sent out the survey about the school calendar, and some of the families requested that we have something like an unannounced snow day, just to give people a break, to give students a break, to give parents a break. We recognize that this has been a challenging situation for everyone. And we also recognize that working from home has been particularly challenging for teachers because teachers, while they always work from home in the evening, they're not teaching from home. And so the work environment is not set up typically for instruction. It's been, I think, challenging physically for people to be in front of screens and to be in home environments where, the setup is not necessarily ergonomically ideal. And just in listening to the feedback from the staff and from the families, the Wellness Committee proposed having 2 early dismissal days, one May 15th, one May 22nd, as the superintendent said. And those days really would be opportunities for students and staff to end the day early and focus on activities related to their wellness. The committee would like to recommend activities for students and staff. We have a range of activities ranging from recipes, outdoor activities, virtual activities, fitness, obviously. And those would all be optional because we recognize that wellness means different things to different people. So people may choose to observe the wellness afternoon in a different way, but we certainly want to put recommendations out there for people. And then we will encourage them to tag us. We have our Wilton Way CT hashtag and our WPS We Still Can hashtag, where we have people who are posting activities that they're doing even in spite of all of the challenges that we face and the restrictions that we face through this pandemic. So we're hopeful that this is something that the board will support, because we think this is self-care and wellness is important. It's more important now than ever. And we think this is something that could be very beneficial, not just for our staff, but also for our students and families.
Makes sense. It really does.
So is this funded then by your insurance, by their insurance, the Anthem you mentioned? So
I was just, yeah, I was speaking broadly that, you know, we choose to have activities throughout the school year. Some of them are no cost whatsoever, and some of them do have a small cost. For example, our walking challenge had a small cost because we had prizes, and we awarded each winner in the building a Fitbit Versa, which obviously had a cost to it, but we were able to pay for that through funds that were provided by Anthem for wellness activities. So if we don't use those funds, we actually lose them because they're supposed to be designated specifically for wellness activities.
Okay, and
with our water bottles were no cost to the district.
my other question is, there's only 2 more Fridays after those 2.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a discussion about having those 2 Fridays also be considered more a wellness and cut at 12 o'clock or close at 12?
We didn't discuss that because, you know, honestly, we thought even having 1 day would be wonderful, and we didn't go beyond 2 because, you know, we know that this is somewhat uncharted territory, and we didn't want to go beyond, you know, what the board would think was acceptable. We also recognize that as we near the end of the school year, there are other activities that are going on. It's also, I think, more critical for teachers to finish out their activities, or we may be preparing students for, you know, culminating projects, and teachers may want to be available to them. I think it's certainly something that we can consider, but the committee did not speak about anything beyond 2.
Isn't the last Friday typically a half day anyway?
And I'm sorry that I don't know
Last
whether
Friday.
June 10th is a Friday. The
Huh?
last few days are
Is
always
it,
half days.
Kevin? Yeah, the
The last few days are,
2 are typically half days as it is, right?
the last
Yeah.
several
Half
days of
days
school are commonly half days. That's
8, 9,
correct.
and 10.
Yes.
So
And
this
we
is
would keep that schedule.
right. So these would be in addition to that, which is fine. More power. Go for it. Yeah. I
Okay.
think
Any
everyone
other
is gonna-
comments or questions?
Yeah, I just think a lot of people are getting burned out on the e-learning right now, parents and kids. I really do. What I'm hearing, it's enough is enough already. You know, so we can give them some relief from that. I think it would be well received.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Is there a motion to approve the 2 shortened days of May 15th and May 22nd and designate them as wellness half-days?
So
Is there a
moved.
motion? Thank you, Glenn. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry. All right, Gretchen, I think I saw your hand first. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hello? Thank you.
Aye.
Deliver the good
All right,
news,
go.
Maria.
Unless it's my sound, I apologize. Okay. All right,
Okay.
anybody opposed? All right, if motion carries, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back to section D on reports. And we're going to talk about year-end or end-of-year celebrations first. And there are several. And Kevin, I don't know how you've organized it, but I'll turn it over to you.
Let's start with Bob. So that's the big question I think on everybody's mind is, you know, what are we thinking about for graduation, especially in light of the governor's comment yesterday. So Bob, why don't you give us a rundown?
Sure. So Firstly, we have an excellent graduation committee that is seated right now, comprised of student leaders, parent leaders, senior class advisors. Mr. Shell's our senior class principal, our student government faculty advisors, Dr. Harvey and Mrs. Bray. So we're really working concertedly to ensure that we can design something that will be fitting to celebrate this really, really outstanding class of 2020, because we recognize, as we've all talked about, this has been very different from them. And the ceremony will look different. We understand that, and we recognize that, you know, the governor weighed in earlier in the week about having, you know, probably virtual graduations being the best way to go and not live ceremonies in June. And we met as district and town officials earlier in the week and feel that along the lines of safety, that is probably the best approach at this time. To their credit, our students are not very interested in a true virtual graduation. And I say that to their credit because they have a number of ideas. We actually had another graduation committee meeting today. So I'll just take the board through some of the possibilities that we're considering, none of which we've decided upon. We have some more research to do, and we also will be meeting again next Thursday. One of the topics we talked about at length today was the possibility of, you know, postponing the ceremony in the hopes of still having some type of social distancing live ceremony. And we recognize as a committee that may be a risk, but it's still on the table. Families can anticipate that our student leaders would be sending out some type of survey trying to inquire about summer vacation plans. And if there's a window later on in the summer when we could do something like this safely and students would not have left for college and or other opportunities. So that is one thing that we're considering. The other thing that we've had a lot of good conversation about is some type of graduation parade, if you will, and many of you may have seen these on social media. So the students would be in their cars with their families as a nuclear family, a family unit. And we have the support of the town health director that could be a safe approach because these families are, of course, living together already. So, you know, for example, and this is just an example, you know, the students could take a route. They mentioned early on the desire to maybe have a parade by all 4 of the schools. So the idea that they may start at Miller Driscoll, proceed through Middlebrook, proceed through Cider Mill, arriving at the high school, and then we could organize some really, really cool ceremony in front of the high school where we'd have the opportunity to have students get their picture taken with their families, with their diploma cover, and have that be memorialized that way. We have our student musicians through the leadership of Nick Loafman and Kevin Catalese, et cetera. They could do some type of, you know, projection of music, fitting music for the class and for the graduation ceremony. So that is currently under consideration as well. The students like the idea to some extent of the parade, but they really feel as if we did that, every student would not have the opportunity to see all of the students in the class honored and celebrated. So we are exploring the possibility of some type of drive-in ceremony. So a graduation parade, which, you know, could culminate in a drive-in ceremony. So if you could picture, there would be giant screens with a projection and a stage and, you know, some speeches, although they've talked about modifying the extent to which there be speeches, and the students receiving their diploma with their families. We'd have to work out the details of that, but we talked to the town health director about that possibility, and it's still on the table. One of the limitations there that we're finding is that to find a space where we could have the entire, you know, class, 300 strong in all of their different cars, all lined up seeing a screen, could be a challenge. So we're working through some of those logistics and try to figure that out a little bit. One possibility that was put on the table today by the students, I would emphasize, and this is not an ideal, but they're wondering if we could not all get in one area at the same time, would we ever, you know, split the ceremony and divide it up and have a, you know, a couple of back-to-back ceremonies where we'd honor the students. You'd still be able to get, you know, maybe let's say 150 cars in one drive-in ceremony is a possibility. And then the students actually submitted today, and we were brainstorming, are there actual, drive-in theaters? And we've located a couple within about an hour of Wilton where you could do a true drive-in graduation ceremony with a big screen and appropriate music and acknowledgement and students being acknowledged and pictured on the screen, and that's a possibility. So anyways, there are a number of options on the table, and one of the things that we always value in this committee work is the student voice, and that's always been one of the hallmarks of the process. We've got great student leaders, and we're trying to work with them to find a way to really celebrate this class in true Wilton Warrior form. So those are some of the possibilities on the table right now. And then very briefly, beyond graduation, we are working on designing some, basically some virtual award ceremonies, the academic award ceremony, the Fine and Performing Arts Award ceremony, and the athletics award ceremony. And we have our next senior prom committee meeting tomorrow. So those are some of the highlights we're working on as we approach the end of the year.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Any
Thank you,
questions or
and
comments
thank
for
you.
Bob?
Yeah.
I think the drive-in thing sounds great. That would be fun to go to a drive-in. I grew up going to drive-ins, and yes.
Bob, it's Mandy. I am just thrilled.
Yeah, no,
that the
it's very
students
creative.
are behind her. I love that the students are doing this, and I love that they're the ones driving this bus.
Mhm.
It's the Wilton way. Thank you, Mandy.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else,
Any
we'll
other
move on
comments?
to,
Yeah, I also think it's great that, yeah, very creative. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Kevin.
Yep, Lauren, you're up. Lauren, can you hear? Your mic is muted.
Lauren, I think you're still on mute.
There you go.
And it was brilliant what I said. Just kidding. We think that children being ready to move up to high school is just a huge occasion to mark. And we have a very strong tradition in Soaring Ahead, which is our moving up ceremony. We've had quite a bit of conversation, particularly with the 8th grade team leaders, about parts of the tradition that we can maintain and also some things that we may add to enhance a celebration. Certainly our Soaring Ahead celebration will be centered around a video and featuring student speeches, addresses from key staff members, just the same kinds of welcome from Dr. O'Donnell to the high school. And it would be available. I think that what we hope to do is to launch it at like an official time that we hope that people will partake sort of in the ceremony together, but it would certainly be available for families to enjoy asynchronously as well. There are definitely some suggestions being sort of proffered from our parent community, and we welcome those. And it's definitely a work in progress in terms of what all of the finishing touches will be. Students will receive a certificate that they certainly will be able to access electronically. And we will, the teachers are already hard at work on making sure that every student has a special quote, which is part of our tradition, from a teacher who really connects with them and cares about them. And I think that while the quotes won't be read out loud, we will have a way during the ceremony to feature each 8th grader. I think our plan is to set it up so that you could either watch the whole ceremony start to finish as one viewing opportunity, or there could be links to separate sections so that families could sort of curate what it is that they choose to access. So that's the plan as I understand it.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments?
Lauren, I was just wondering, do you have any ideas on dates yet to start getting that out to the families?
I do believe that we have a tentative date set. And I know that it was sent to be on the calendar to Lucille, but I just have to, I'm sorry, I'm in a screen with you all and I need to go find it. Can I get back to you on that?
Tentative
Yeah,
date,
well,
actually,
On the date?
the tentative date, I think that's being held is June 8th.
Thank you.
I think the video is a great idea. So I think that, you know, I think it would be great for the kids and everyone to be able to watch it maybe at the same time.
Thank you, Gretchen. And I appreciate you consulting with me on that. I do know that the 8th grade teams are also planning sort of an end of the year huddle that will be more personal exposure to all of the teachers on the team. And they have, in addition, we are doing our end of the year awards ceremonies by video as well. And there will be electronic certificates that families can access. But there is a tradition of sort of each team sort of tying a bow on the end of the experience. And I know that the 8th grade team leaders have been communicating about what that will look like. By design, it won't be the same for every team because each of our teams has their own culture. But we will be giving as meaningful a version of our end of year traditions as possible to our students.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead, Jen.
All right, so we will be celebrating our closing of the year as well. Very sad to be doing it virtually. Somehow I was still thinking there was some way we were going to end up together to close out the year. So we will be working, going into next week, we're going to obviously be planning with Middlebrook how to transition and plan for our 5th graders moving up to Middlebrook. But in terms of celebrations, we've got lots planned. We will be working obviously with the health department and other district officials, but we are hoping to be able to celebrate our 5th grade with some kind of parade or caravan, I should say. We'll also be doing the typical celebrations that we do, although virtually, and we'll be having a slideshow. We'll be working with the PTA yearbook reps from the PTA, and they've got tons of pictures that I know Ms. O'Keefe is working on a really nice video for them. Every classroom will be having some type of closing house where we'll be celebrating parts of the e-learning portfolio that our students will be creating. We are also going to be celebrating our 5th graders with some type of special little gift. We're still working on that. And let's see, what else here? Yes, that's really it. We did send out a newsletter yesterday that had all of the dates. Oh, the other thing is our BTA will be distributing our yearbooks as we usually do, but we're still working out the logistics for that as well.
Okay.
That's about it.
Thank you.
Any
Questions, comments?
Oh yeah, last thing is we are having a virtual field day as well. So that should be fun.
Field day, all right.
Virtual field day.
Be sure to invite us. We'd love to see that.
You'll be leading the tug of war.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Kathy, you're up.
All right. Well, similar to what Dr. Falcone talked about, a lot of our celebrations are the same. First, just our portfolio of pride is going to be a huge celebration. So it celebrates the academics and the specials and let grow. And like Jen said, they do closing house. We call it celebration of learning. So there will be a version of that. And then hopefully the parents who are listening will be happy to know that we're going to also do a version of the 2nd grade picnic, which is kind of our graduation. But and so we'll do that Friday, June 5th, and we have booked a magician, and then we're going to come up with just some additional activities for the kids to enjoy, whether they're outside or some virtual field trips to museums and things like that. And then we're looking at, concerts and art shows and virtual field days and working with our specialists on that. So hopefully the next 5 weeks will be packed with fun.
Yep. Great. Any questions or comments for Kathy? No. Well, I'm just so impressed how all of you are just diving right in and trying to be as creative as possible. And I realize it's going to be certainly work for your staff and parents. And I'm so glad that the kids are involved wherever possible. So you're making the best of a really strange, weird, sad situation. So thank you for emphasizing the happiness. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, Deborah, for Bob. How are the yearbooks coming to the high school?
Yeah.
That's a major, project. What's happening with that?
Was the question, how are they looking
The
right
yearbook.
now, Mr. Howard?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yearbooks. What are we,
Well, my understanding is they're on track because fortunately many of the photos that are taken earlier in the year. And so we just have to find a way to, we're working on a number of fronts. Just how do you distribute things to students in a safe and effective manner, and we will find a way to do so, including, for example, caps and gowns. But the good news for really the whole school, but the class of 2020, is that the yearbooks are on track, and it's always a very high quality product. And I would anticipate nothing less this year.
Right.
We're all looking forward to it. Any celebrations we can engage in right now.
All right, good.
The school community needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yearbooks
Good.
are important to the students, the seniors, and no, that's great. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, the next item is review and discuss re-entry planning.
Sure. So we just wanted to take a
that
few
okay?
minutes tonight and update the board on our thinking. So I'm going to turn this portion of the conversation over to Chuck, who's going to share a screen and just walk us through a couple of slides that really highlight our planning and the laundry list of logistical considerations we need to entertain in the various goals that we have laid out. So Chuck, I've made you the host now, so you should be able to share your screen.
Can you see it? Can everybody see it?
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah,
Yep,
there it is.
there.
There it is.
It's there.
Yeah.
Got too many windows open.
Yay. Okay, good. Yeah. All right, so I think as we have been acknowledging for a few weeks now, we're all facing a very uncertain future. And it makes it difficult to plan, but in many ways it also makes it more essential that we plan. We really need to think about what the different scenarios are so that we're not caught unprepared the way we were when school was closed. So we've committed to making a concerted and thoughtful effort to move forward with planning and to think about the different possible scenarios that we might encounter. So we started, and I wanted to say that the place we're in right now is what we're trying to do is to kind of scope out the problem and develop an approach. We're not quite ready to share detailed action plans. That would be the next step. But as I said before, we're facing a lot of uncertainty, and so we're trying to define the problem very clearly and to come up with a very well-defined approach so that we can come up with the different plans that we're going to need to do. So we started by developing a purpose and a vision, and that's to continue teaching and learning in a way that promotes the academic growth and wellness of our students, while also ensuring the health and safety of all members of the school community. When we started this, we were thinking it was going to be a reopening plan, but we're not necessarily sure that we'll be reopening. So we want to plan for the different scenarios, but the core purpose here is to make sure that we continue teaching and learning in a way that helps our students to grow and maintains everybody's safety, no matter what scenario we're facing. So we thought, as we do with all planning, to start with a theory of action. And so we want to develop some robust plans for a variety of possible scenarios for the continuation of teaching and learning. And we believe if we do that, then we'll be prepared for an uncertain future during this COVID-19 pandemic. And we believe these plans have to be very detailed and thorough and coordinated across schools, departments, and community agencies. And so we've developed about 9 goals. And those include, first and foremost, developing a plan for deciding if, when, how, and for whom schools will be reopened. There's a lot of things that are going into that particular goal, and it's not a goal that we would make in isolation. We would certainly be making the decision about reopening in conjunction with town and state officials. But I think we need to recognize the fact that although we may be required to open at a certain time, there's also a possibility that given what's going on in our particular community, we may have to close and then reopen again. So it's important that we think through all the factors that might be pertinent to any decisions about closing and reopening. We also want to develop a very robust learning management system, because there's a likelihood that we may have intermittent school closures in the future. I do think that everyone has done an amazing job under the circumstances, but we weren't prepared for it. And a more robust learning management system will ensure that we are prepared for any eventuality. We've also discussed the other basic 3 goals around determining what students know and able to do academically when we're back, and developing a plan for adjusting the curriculum based upon that information, and based upon the fact that we might be closed again, which might require some further compacting of the curriculum, and reimagining the process for how we identify students in need of academic intervention. And we might have to think about, depending upon the number of students who are in need of remediation, rethinking how they will be served. Certainly one of our major goals would be to promote the wellness of our students, teachers, and parents, given everything that everybody's been through. And we want to make sure that we're reaching out and supporting our families and students who may need some extra TLC. I do believe that given the circumstances, what our juniors have gone through, we need to give our seniors next year some special attention. And we need to really think carefully about making sure that they have kind of a seamless access to post-secondary opportunities. And we'll be asking the high school to kind of address that goal. All of these goals are somewhat interconnected and are going to require a lot of coordination and certainly a lot of communication among all of our stakeholder groups. So that's one of our goals, to develop a very tight system of coordination and communication. And then, of course, we have to think about staffing. Given the contemplated changes in the learning environment and the educational delivery model, we really need to think through how we're going to go about staffing. So each of these goals has a lot of considerations, and just in the interest of time, I didn't think we would want to go through all of them. So I'm just going to go through the first goal, just to give you an idea of the scope of the things that we're going to be dealing with. So if you recall from an earlier slide, the goal was really about deciding if, when, how, and for whom we would be reopening and maybe reclosing again. So some of the considerations we have to think about are the public health risks. To what extent can the health of students, family, staff, and the general population be safeguarded while opening our schools? Also, to what extent does the school closure contribute to loss of income and unemployment in the Wilton community? What impact does it have on student learning? And one thing that I'm very concerned about is, to what extent are we ready to reopen with the right health and safety measures in place? We also have to think about student academic and social emotional needs. We have to look at various demographics, as well as the school community priorities. There are different scenarios we have to think about. there is a possibility that we will not be able to reopen. There's also a possibility that we may want to target certain groups or levels or grade levels, and it's quite possible we might have to phase in a reopening. We have to think about the physical infrastructure, changes to ensure social distancing, to enable health and sanitization protocols, and to create healthy buildings. We have to think about things like ventilation. We also have to think about transportation and food services. We may have to make changes to the routes, to how buses are cleaned. We have to think about the packaging of food and utensils and lunch schedules and locations. We have to think about how free and reduced lunches can occur during distance learning. And then we also have to think about scheduling and staffing. We may have to adapt the way we schedule to reduce the number of students on site at any time. We might have to create cohorts that would minimize interactions between students and teachers. We'll probably have to avoid large group gatherings and so forth. This is one of the most important things, and probably the thing we need to start with, and hopefully we'll get some guidance from the State Ed Department about this, and that's around health and behavioral norms. We have to think about social distancing. We have to think about personal protective equipment. Even hand washing can be a bit of a challenge. To put into place some of the hand washing protocols, we'd have to think about the number of sinks we have, where they're located, how we can have kids frequently hand washing while maintaining social distancing. So even something as simple as hand washing really creates some logistical challenges. We have to think about students sharing supplies and materials. In the typical classroom, there's a lot of sharing, and we may not be able to do that. We're going to have to think about how kids and staff enter and exit the school site. There's a possibility we may have to temp kids, temp staff. We have to think about enhanced cleaning and sanitization of the buildings. There's issues around contact tracing, and then if there is an incident, what are our emergency and disease management protocols? And then how do we train everybody in all of this? We also have to think about re-enrollment procedures. We do have some high-risk students and families and even staff. Will we offer an opt-out for some people? What would be the distance learning options for certain groups that may not be able to attend school? We have to think about updating health records and also protecting everybody's privacy. We also have to think about the resurgence of COVID. What would be the process for closing the school? What criteria would we use? And would we be ready for distance learning? And then there's things, that we generally do around this time that we're not able to do, well, at least not as well. Technology, curriculum materials, the library, facilities, and so forth. You know what, let me share something else here before I get to the timeline. So this is the text, the full text that I developed that PowerPoint from. All I did here was go over goal 1. All of this has to be considered just for goal 1. The management system, Fran has a whole project management plan that I couldn't even fit here. This is some of the stuff that we're thinking about for goal 3, goal 4, goal 5, goal 6, all the way down to goal 9. From all of these goals, we're now going to have to develop these rather detailed action plans. So that would actually be our next step. So this is, oops, sorry. This is the timeline. So during May and June, we're going to develop working groups around each of these goals, and they're going to develop the action plans. And we plan to give you an update on that work at, I think, the May 21st meeting. Phase 2 will be during June, July, and August. The working groups will engage not only in further planning, but also to begin to implement some of those action plans. And that's going to include robust communication with students, parents, and staff. And then phase 3 would be the working groups who will continue to refine and implement the reopening plans throughout 2021. So I was just wondering, that's a lot. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
Yeah, it's absolutely.
I'm sorry.
It's absolutely mind-boggling, Chuck, what you guys now are having to go through. And I guess a question, Kevin, would be, is there any sense that Cave, who represents all of us, really, can put pressure to bear on the state, and perhaps the state can't, to really develop as quickly as humanly possible what their guidelines are going to be? I mean, the problem is all of what Chuck has described and talked about, which is lengthy, maybe for not, depending on what the guidelines the state provides, could go right out the window. And it will be dictated by whatever the state says will be what we are required to do. So to the extent the state can develop as quickly as possible what their expectations are, the guidelines they're going to operate within, will make it all of your jobs and challenges not easy, but perhaps easier or more specific and more targeted. And I don't know if Cave is the way to go, to try to get the pressure from the state to come on, guys, do something, figure it out, or not.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And every group that I participate in on this topic outside of Wilton, so I was on that call this morning with a group of the superintendents from Western Connecticut. Tomorrow I'll be on another call with the Southern Fairfield group. We're interfacing all the time. And I also am participating in the Commissioner's Fairfield County Regional Reentry Task Force, which is comprised of public school officials from the 21 communities around us here. And so that is absolutely the question. And what I would say is I know for a fact, in fact, that they absolutely are already feeling the pressure and recognize that all of those considerations that Chuck just laid out are dependent on the guidance that's issued. What we're anticipating is guidance coming in waves. And so what the commissioner has said is on May 15th, we can expect guidance for summer school, summer camps. My hunch is that guidance will reflect some of the guidance that's currently in place for, excuse me, childcare programs. And what you can expect is, small group sizes, social distancing, et cetera. But they're working at the State Department, I think, as rapidly as possible. And the other thing I would just remind everybody is, over the years, the State Department has also been subject to dramatic budget cuts. So there just aren't a lot of staff members up there available to do this kind of work. So the folks that are there are doing double and triple duty, trying to, manage all of these many requests.
Yeah. As all of you guys are doing double and triple duty. Chuck, I think it was really wonderful. It's very detailed, and obviously you guys have put a lot of thought into it. Sadly, I just don't know what we can do from a reality standpoint until we get guidance from the state. Some of the things you've talked about may or may not be necessary or important, or maybe totally impacted greatly. It's just hard to say right now, and it's a challenge for all of you. It really is. I appreciate the efforts.
My hope is that we do get a lot of guidance from the state, but I'm afraid to wait for it.
Yeah,
we're really trying to think about what the different scenarios might be and develop plans for these different scenarios so that we're ready.
Yeah, I mean, a thought I had is that perhaps, at some point, because of the density of the population in schools and the classrooms and the distancing, half the students go one day, the other half the students go the next day, the other half go, you alternate days. I mean, there's so many things that could come down to minimize risk. Who knows what it's going to be.
Glenn, I was stuck on school. So I was stuck on just trying to get kids to school. So I was imagining a scenario where, we're trying to socially distance our young children at bus stops, trying to imagine socially distancing them on buses. And then if there are health screening requirements in place, at what point did those happen? So this morning, as I was thinking about this, I was like entertaining this scenario where a bus driver, could be charged with using a touchless thermometer. And I can't get my head around that, but, the logistics of just getting kids to school are overwhelming. And then, move on to now that they're there, what do you do?
Then when you get them to the school, how do you let them in? What do you have to do to get them in? Do you check everyone's temperature? I mean, there's so many things that could, it's crazy. Just insane. Okay.
All right. Ruth, I want to give Ruth a chance to talk. Ruth, I thought you had a question.
It wasn't so much a question as I appreciate the magnitude and the enormity of the task at hand. I think that, Chuck, you're right, that we kind of wait for the state a little bit to our detriment. And I think having a great understanding of what our own infrastructure can handle is probably a good place to start, because we know that there will be some type of social distance requirements, and there is a physical limitation with space and facilities. Yeah. And then just my other thought is just, even if we have more than one scenario that we're outlining, to maybe communicate what that tentative organization of how and when kids are physically present in school comes sooner than later, as parents start to negotiate reentry with their own employment and employers. And I'm just trying to make that as kind of consistent as possible. I know that I had read somewhere, I think some states were looking at some ideas of, some students Monday, Wednesday, Friday, some students Tuesday, Thursday, and then alternating that. And I'm just thinking of waking up as a parent and being like, what week am I in? Or trying to, know how I'm going to schedule my own kind of work and childcare around that type of rotating schedule. So I think that, trying just to game some of those out a bit and getting some feedback from the community and trying to kind of assess, our physical limitations and see what is even possible is, I think, a good place to start. And kind of, the earlier we can let parents in on, that type of thinking or those types of, organization processes, I think, personally, I think that the better.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, in response to both Ruth and Blaine, fortunately, we do have some places to look to. There have been places in Europe that have taken different approaches, and I think that's where we're going to start and try to narrow down what seems to be the most common ways in which this reopening of schools has been approached. We're also going to be getting some data about the effectiveness of those approaches, right? So the resurgence information will be flowing as these different approaches are used, and I think we can narrow in on what seem to be the most effective. And Ruth, I do hope that parents will be part of this whole process of figuring out how we're going to approach these different goals.
Yeah, I think it is important to include the parents to the extent possible, that makes sense. Their partnership has been, changed in this online learning, and it's going to, go into another evolution next year. The families will have to be, very much integrated into whatever plans are implemented. And thank you for taking the different scenario approach. trying to, start on many different roads. And then maybe as time goes by, you can start to eliminate some or, maybe even expand, who knows. But, my first thought is how overwhelming this is, on every single level, you can imagine. And as hard as it was to close and the challenges we went through with that, this is even more complex. So, it's amazing that we even have to think this way. And I know we have a great team, but for now, I'm just overwhelmed, just at the beginning of this thinking. It's also why I have scheduled more Board of Ed meetings. They're tentative, but, as we unveil these plans or get down these roads and, want to keep the board apprised and the community apprised, it will probably take more meetings as well by us as a board. So that's why I've calendared on a tentative basis every Thursday between now and June 18th. And we may have to do more than that. And if we don't need one, then we don't have to have one. But I just wanted to sort of give everybody a heads up, get it on the calendar. So in addition to every other week, we're going to start meeting weekly if needed. So I'll take Kevin's lead.
I think that makes sense, Deborah. It really does, because things are going to be coming down the pike so fast and furious that we're going to have to deal with, I hope, quickly. It makes sense to do that. It's a good move.
Yeah. Well, again, if we don't need a meeting, we won't have one, but I just want to keep us available. But thank you so much to Kevin and Chuck for, your work groups. Kevin said the State Department didn't have enough staff. Are we staffed enough to reasonably be able to do this? And I mean that seriously.
I think we're very lucky to have a lot of people who could help with this. I think the challenge for us is getting stuck from the day-to-day operations of this emergency learning and finding the time to look forward. This is very unusual for us, and it's taking up a lot of time to kind of shift gears now and think about the future is challenging, but there are a lot of talented people around who I think we can draw on, even in the community.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just Chuck's last comment that people in the community, if there's something that you feel you need to help you in this process, let us know. And we can maybe, as a board, try and ferret out support for you in some way, or find someone that can give you some assistance. So don't be hesitant, don't be shy about asking as you're trying to move this forward. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, good point. And that also is another exclamation point after our budget proposal that we're presenting to the Board of Finance. Clearly we need resources for this. Yeah. And so to diminish those is a mistake. Yep. Okay. We've opened a can of worms, more than that. But thank you for giving us a glimpse. Thank you for bringing it to us so early. Thanks for organizing it so well. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Fortunately, it's only a can of worms and not a snake pit.
Well, let's hope. Yeah, I know. But it is overwhelming. So anyway, thank you for beginning. All right. There's some future business and information items there, and I guess I already went over those. Those are the additional Thursday night meetings, just to try to get into a weekly cycle, stand on call kind of thing. And I'll take it from Kevin as to which meetings are needed. Yeah. That brings us to comments from the public. Lucille, I'm not sure if you got any more during the meeting or at this point.
No, I just checked my email. I don't have any additional comments.
Okay.
We had a lot of.
All right, then we have completed.
It was good tonight.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, we have a great audience, and I think I'll say it again. The Board of Finance would like to hear opinions about our proposed budget. So thank you. Please consider emailing. All right, we have finished the agenda, so I am adjourning this meeting. So thank you, everybody, staff members, for sticking with us, and board members for putting forward what I think is as good a budget plan as possible in this time. And Kevin, thank you and your staff.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.